So
So we'll
we
see.
should be, I think we're streaming. I hope. Everything on a go slow this morning, just like me. Right, so that's closed. Yeah, where was the issue? I'm sure I'll find it here. Easier in Slack or Discord? There we go. So I'm share not my screen with 100 tabs open, just my screen with new tabs. Okay, so Jay raised the issue after the conversation following on from Slack.
Mhm.
So yeah, if anyone wants to follow along. So yeah, feel free to summarize, but I won't pretend to understand. All it was is questioning like, oh, why are we doing it this way? And then there was sort of some, oh, I think it could be legacy, or that was the best way at the time, or
Yeah. I mean, do you want to kick it off now or wait for that
well,
particular community contributor?
I think I've pinged them on it, but because we're
Okay.
recording and streaming this, if you want to
Like
vocalize
some.
or verbalize, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. Just I think it's probably clear. That's what I love about the way that we work. You know that
Yeah.
everything has gone in the issue. But if you don't mind summarizing that, that'd be helpful.
Yeah. So, I mean, someone raised the question, and then Che created the issue about why the CLI does have its own HTTP mocking package and functionality, because there exists this HTTP test in the Go standard library, which is a legit
Mhm.
question. And we didn't really know why it exists, but it dates back quite a while before GitLab took over the project. And HTTP test would have existed at the time, but I'm sure there have been reasons.
So
Uh,
I forgot that this was even one of those, because obviously we had the Terraform provider, which sort of is very much in your history, your background, right? Bringing that across, and then much more recently the Go client. But this one, I had forgotten that even was started out as a community project, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. There have been a
Do you,
bunch of projects like
sorry.
there have been a bunch of projects
Yeah.
been taken over, which is a good
I
sign,
want
I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder how long ago this one was now then. But sorry, so yeah, it was a legacy anyway.
Yeah, yeah. So no particular reason. And the point I raised here was that maybe mocking HTTP is the wrong abstraction for testing because in the CLI, we do not really care about the HTTP layer. We just want to, get a user, for example, or get a current branch or something like this, right? We don't
Right.
want to, in the test, we don't want to write JSON that's coming from the API because if you write a command in the CLI, you interface with a Go SDK and not with HTTP directly. So why would you know about HTTP when you're testing? It's kind of not the right abstraction for testing.
Okay, so
Um,
what you're saying is we're not mocking the Go client, we're mocking the next layer down almost
yeah,
from
yeah.
okay, yeah.
And if you look at the development of the client Go package, which is this SDK doing the actual HTTP for production code, then if you look at the tests there and the tests in the CLI, they look very, very similar from a testing perspective. They're both, targeting the API, which is like, well, in the CLI, we're actually testing stuff that client Go should only be concerned about and not the
Okay,
CLI.
yeah. Yeah. More not exactly integration, but there's another layer there. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, just to be clear, we're mocking HTTP, right? We never do an actual HTTP call during tests.
Got
Uh,
it. Yeah.
and so client Go didn't really provide a nice way to do mocking. That's because it didn't implement any interfaces, which is
Okay.
usually what you're mocking. So you would, if you create a new GitLab client, it would give you a struct And there's no way to kind of swap this out with, a test object that you could mock on or you could fake or whatever double you want to provide. And
Yeah.
I changed this like last week, maybe. I did a huge refactoring in Client Go
Oh
that
wow. Do you want to share your screen or do you want to share a link that I can
I
open
think you
up
can,
or
yeah, the second related merge request in that issue, I think it's that one, maybe. Yeah, so you see the amount of
wow,
change
yeah.
files. It's actually interesting. I used AI to assist me there.
Amazing.
Because it was pretty so if you click on
So
not
have you actually included the scripts that you use to generate like
no,
the
no, these are
interface?
yeah, no, no, no. I mean, this is not using AI. These scripts are used to generate all the mocking and testing package. So I've not only changed to interfaces, but I'm actually shipping a testing package, which uses Go mock, but there's other testing packet or mocking packages for Go, which users may want to use. They don't necessarily need to use the testing package we provide. It's just one that we provide. You may use it or you may not. But this change you're looking at right now, that's an AI change because I had to do this change for pretty much every file in Client Go.
Awesome. And I think I've used interfaces mainly in C sharp. So you embed in GoLang, it looks like, so you basically embed the interface in the, do you call these modules or
Yeah, yeah, it's
package?
a file.
Just
Yeah,
a file.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Um, cool. Okay. So, and we've got, I
So
mean,
if you look at the file called gitlab.go,
so there are like a
no, it's
hundred
right
or
there in
so
the
of
middle of the screen.
these.
So here is where a slightly breaking change is happening. So you see how the red lines show this pointer syntax to
Okay.
a
Yeah.
wiki services, for example, wiki service. So that's a pointer to a struct, which is not really possible to mock. Um, And here I changed it to interfaces, which is able to be mocked during testing.
Awesome.
And if you look at in the testing package, there is an example test. So if you scroll up in your file view there on the left side,
And here.
there is a file called client underscore test, I think. Yeah. It's a dumb test arguably, but it kind of shows what's going on. So from the testing package you see here the test function, test client, smoke test, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So you could get this new test client which is basically which implements the GitLab client and you can use as a as a GitLab client. And what you would do in a test is you would set this up, you would set up your mock expectations, which you see there, the mock metadata expect on line 16, that expects the get metadata function to be called exactly once. And
Yeah.
then in the test, we would run the like our app that we want to test, like the CLI, for example, and we would give it a GitLab client, which is like you could call it dependency injection or we're just providing it a client.
Cool.
And if you look at the run my app function, you see how it takes just the GitLab client, right? It doesn't know anything about testing, which is this is production code, right? To run my app, it would live in another file, in another, in a real world scenario. So there you see the metadata dot get metadata call, which is the one we
Yeah.
mock. Yeah, this is what's happening here, right? It's basically mocking that call. It's not reaching out to GitLab or anything. And
Awesome.
yeah.
Awesome.
And
So have you then, these are all new tests for every,
these are all mocks. These are mocks that we provide in the testing package. So from a CLI perspective, we can import this testing package and we get mocks for all the functions in the GitLab client already
okay.
set up and generated. This basically removes the need for our users to generate mocks as long as they're using GoMock.
Okay.
If they're not using GoMock, they may just produce their own mocks for the interfaces we provide because those are public and you can access them and you can implement them by yourself. You can implement a fake in your test. You can implement the
So a mock is it essentially like a concrete class using the implementing the interface that you
yes,
created? And what does like so these are types, so these are like the methods that
yeah,
are in the concrete class. So what do you do in these mock like methods? What do they do, if that makes sense?
yeah. So this is code that's been generated, right? We don't like we treat it as a black box. I can't really tell you like all the details here, but what's essential is if you call the expect and then one of those functions from the recorder, like change appearance, for example, you
Mm-hmm.
can set up a spy, or you can set up, a side effect, or you can do some assertions. You can return special values when this function is called. You can assert for that the function is receiving certain argument values and stuff like this.
Oh, okay, okay. So yeah, it's interesting again because I've only worked with like one or two sort of mocking frameworks, if that's the right
Mhm.
term. Like all I've done before, I think, is passed it like an interface, and it just done the rest for you. Do you know what I mean? I've not actually
Yeah.
needed to. The mock's as simple as saying like new mock of this, and it
Yes.
just does it for you. So
And I
this
mean,
is interesting.
this is what you will do as an end user of this package. As an end user of this package, you just call the function to get yourself a test client, and there you have these mock fields where you can set up your expectations, which is what we saw in
Awesome.
this client test, smoke test thingy before,
Yeah.
right? Which is what
Yeah.
we saw in here. You see the expect on line 16, which is where we expect a certain function to be called um,
Awesome.
during the.
Yeah. Oh. Um, I just see Mohammed and Kaiser, I think. If you've got any questions, not particularly relating to this, but anything to bring to the table, we're happy to chat about it. Otherwise, Timo, I'm gonna continue to get you to share some stuff if you don't mind. There's some stuff I'd love to know sort of what we're doing with the client Go package since we brought it across, and because I know I've certainly seen there's been a lot of community activity in there, so I'd love to know a bit more about that. But
Yeah.
um, hey, Mohammed.
Hi. I came across GitLab through the Google Sum of Code, and I wanted to start contributing to open source. And in the onboarding list of activities, one of them was to join the pairing, this meeting. And I didn't quite understand what it was about. Is it like pair programming where you guys go through issues and how it was resolved? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, of course. So that they are very, very fluid, very dynamic. As you can see today, there's a question that was brought up a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to say Timo, being our resident GoLang expert, or certainly my resident GoLang expert, has come to share a bit more about it. But yeah, sometimes we'll have a specific issue that we're actually pair programming and solving. We might have an MR we're stuck on. We might be trying to flesh out an implementation plan for something, or trying to debug a bug, all sorts of stuff. But yeah, it's just a place where if you've got a specific problem or something you're working on, you're welcome to bring it to the table. I've always got a nice backlog just in case anyone hasn't. But yeah, this is interesting for me today. I haven't done GoLang despite the fact that it's been on my to-do list since I started 3 years ago, and I'm like determined one day. But yeah, I haven't got there yet. So this is interesting.
Okay, that makes total sense. Okay.
Cool. So yeah, Timo, did you want to sit? I won't keep you too long. Appreciate you jumping on. But since the Go client Go package has come across, there's been a lot. So let me see if we're in there already. So we've only got 17 issues. I mean, that looks great. Is that true? Or?
I mean, yeah, it's true. But there is, I would say client Go is the best effort for supporting the REST API. It's what people request that we implement. It's not complete as far as, the REST API coverage goes, but we are usually pretty fast in reviewing and merging stuff. And I would say the most people actually straight up open a merge request without even opening an issue.
Awesome.
Because contributions are rather simple.
Okay. Okay, because it's just a wrap. I don't like saying it's just, but it's just a wrap around the API essentially,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah. It just does, REST API calls pretty much.
okay.
There's some tricky bits here and there, with I don't know, file uploads maybe or other things. But mostly it's the contributions are about, so adding a field to an API, for example,
Yeah, yeah,
which is not
yeah.
all that difficult. Um, so yeah, it's a great project to start contributing. Um,
Yeah, I guess there's not a ton of dependencies, right? Spinning
yeah,
up the
yeah,
development environment's reasonably straightforward and
exactly.
um oh,
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah, and it's used in a bunch of GitLab projects like the provider, the CLI, and others, I think. So
Yeah,
we use
I
it
felt
ourselves.
like I've possibly contributed, despite not being a Golang. I'm not even going to say expert a programmer full stop. I think I may have contributed a long time ago where there
Yeah.
was where we introduced some new flags.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, we get contributions from GitLab team members too.
Absolutely, yeah, of course. I'm not signed in at the moment, but so I know this is something that API is full stop. So we've got a bit of a, or I certainly say I've got a tendency. So introduce a new feature into GitLab. Great, that'll come out one release. Several releases later, we may then create an API. So API doesn't always kind of come at the beginning anyway. It depends. I
It
guess
depends
we're
on the feature,
building.
I guess. It depends on the features, right? There are features where it's known from the get-go that an API will be needed. There are
Yeah,
features which are like, this is probably like a UI only thing, and API development is delayed until someone really needs it. And
yeah, and I guess I'd say if it's a real new feature, then we'd probably almost be, I don't want to say API only, but the way that we build now with our Vue.js front end is it leverages the GraphQL API in the back
yeah,
end.
yeah.
Now, is the client Go REST API only?
It's REST API only today. I had a chat with Patrick once. Um,
Sounds dangerous,
yeah,
right?
yeah, no, 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 no. If we, about the GraphQL API support, because for example, in the CLI and in the provider, we are making use of the GraphQL API just to complete coverage. Where it's missing for REST API, there are features that are not there in
Absolutely,
the
yeah.
REST API. So um, we have to use the GraphQL API. Today, client Go um, is only REST, but there's no good reason to keep it that way forever. Right.
Mm.
So
I can't remember. I think I did. I I sometimes get confused with the Ruby wrapper and the GoLang wrapper.
mhm,
So
mhm.
I think I asked the same question for the Ruby wrapper. Don't know whether it still exists.
They probably just close your requests.
I think they did confirm though that there is.
There
He's
you go.
here. A bit late to the party, but hey,
Hi, sorry for being so late. I still had a work call that went
no, no, not
late.
at all. There's no sort of a mandate for you to be here. you can watch the recording back later on, albeit that I said most of it was probably covered in like the issue discussion anyway.
All right.
But I guess now's a good opportunity. I imagine you've seen the conversation in this issue. I hope it, if not, forgive me because I possibly forgot to share it. But did it raise any questions? Did it make sense? Yeah.
I have not yet seen the discussion, but I can take a quick look through it.
Cool.
For
Let me,
some reason, it didn't get pinged to my mailbox, even though I thought I had set it to. Oh, apparently it didn't set it to give me notifications.
cool. Cool. In which case, I'll let you catch up on that. And then, if you've got any questions, fire them away. We were just talking about some of the other packages, and yeah, I was talking about GraphQL because at the moment both the Ruby GitLab API wrapper and the GoLang GitLab API wrapper both only support the REST API. But it sounds like well, the answer when I asked, wow, I can't believe it was 2 years ago, was that yes, we'd like to implement it in the Ruby one. And sorry, Timo, I think I could cut you off a bit there, but you and Patrick sort of sounds like to get full features eventually, it's gonna have to be done, right?
Yes, I guess so. Depends on the evolvement of the APIs, right?
Yeah, I must admit I don't know what our current stance. I know what my current stance is, but I don't know what our current stance is. I think a while back it was very much that there should be feature parity between the REST API and the GraphQL API, but because our front end, I hope I'm safe in saying this, but our front end, Vue.js much more naturally, natively integrates with GraphQL. So when we're building our APIs for our own consumption, GraphQL would probably be the de facto, the go-to, the default. So I suspect if we haven't already, that we may start to sort of go more to that being the favored approach. If that's fair or.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to leave myself too much out of the window, but it's not. I mean, I haven't seen any decline of or that we have to support more GraphQL over time. I've been maintaining the provider for quite a while now, and it's not that, the feature parity. It's still the same today as it was 2 years ago.
Okay. So the things that I would expect that maybe be lacking would be things like work items. Do you know if all the work that's being done on work items, if most of that's available via the REST API as well?
No, I don't think it is. Yeah, that's one thing. Yeah. But there is issues and plans to support it, I think, pretty soon.
Let's see what it says then. So it says it's more flexible and efficient. Okay. But that's as much as it says in here. Maybe in the development docs, it'll say a bit. I think it,
Yeah.
feeling at some point that we said something somewhere about either trying to maintain feature parity, but I know, as I say, definitely a few bits I've built more recently, like achievements as well. I've only done a GraphQL API for.
I mean, it also highly depends on the use case of what's better or more suited, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's certain things I really like the self-documenting nature of the GraphQL API, and I know somewhere in here we saw just a minute ago it said about how it's more efficient. I guess
Yeah.
again, there's scenarios where it is and scenarios where it isn't, but being able to explicitly say what fields you want and being able to retrieve relational data, which I know the REST API kind of does in some examples, but um, it's down to us what they get rather than the consumer, so to speak.
Yeah.
I mean, if you'd really want to get efficient, you'd introduce a gRPC API, but that's a whole nother beast.
Oh, don't make me learn about something new. And I think that's how Gitaly communicates, like between GitLab and Gitaly, or GitLab and Git essentially. But I don't pretend to know
Yeah, it's
how
what
it
we use a
works.
lot internally, actually. We also use it for Kubernetes agent server and the
Oh,
agent
cool.
and Gitaly, that's true, and other.
Yeah,
So it's like we highly use it, yeah.
awesome. Um, cool. Have you got anything else you want to share, Timo, before we drop off?
No, no, not really, not really. I mean, I have time, so if you have questions or anything, then I'm sure I can stay in.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything. I'm gonna have a quick look if I can find out that um feel bad, but maybe borrowing your Terraform brain to see if you can help us move something forward that sat idle for probably a couple of years. I'm just gonna see if I can find the project.
But yeah, quickly read through the HTTP mock issue.
Awesome.
Uh, I'm gonna be honest, my initial question was just to see if there was a specific reason why it was used. It wasn't even initially intended on my end to say, hey, this should be replaced. It was just, hey, why is this used? And so this has evolved a bit more than I originally intended. But I agree with the bit that dealing with the HTTP requests in the CLI repo directly might be not the best idea. So yeah, I also think the f facade idea is kind of a good idea in my opinion.
Yeah, as it is right now with the changes with you kind of missed that part. Um, but the client Go package offers a way now to set up your own mocks, and it provides a testing package that sets up Go mocks for the client. So we don't really need the facade anymore because we can mock directly, right? So we don't need to implement the facade as an interface and then mock that and use it in the CLI, which eases things a little bit.
That's even
Right.
better.
Yeah.
If I'm in the right window here, yeah, this was the big merge request, introducing interfaces and all of the mocks.
Mm.
So this was already in flight. Was it before the conversation
It was in my
started?
mind before the conversation.
Ah, okay. I say
And
so.
actually, yeah, and actually what I wrote there with the facade, I actually implemented that for some commands that I contributed in the past. Um, yeah,
And
so
had you implemented that like in another package though, or
in the CLI, in the
yeah,
CLI,
awesome.
yeah. And but it doesn't like it was just isolated to that specific command, and it would be nice if the entire CLI would do a certain way, and not that every command just looks like the feeling of the contributor. So yeah, I took the time to actually provide something useful in client Go, which we can use in the CLI or can start using in the CLI. It's not that we will do a big bang migration of the tests or anything like this. That's just too big of a chunk of work. So we probably gradually gonna change the commands that are that we, I don't know, need to change or new ones or whatever.
Yeah, for that it would probably make sense to create like a tracking issue with a list
Yeah.
of stuff that needs to be changed so you can uh tick the checkbox off if it's dealt with.
Yeah, maybe that or track the usage of the internal API functions that we have.
Yeah.
These lists tend to get out of sync. So having, I don't know, a script to report on usages of certain functions in the code base may make sense. I don't know, but yeah, maybe something to track might certainly be a good idea. Yeah.
Just out of interest, what are these mocks generated from? Just from the uh interfaces or whatever exists already in the client Go, or is this generating somewhat from the API definitions?
Yeah, no, it's not from API definitions. It's from so in the client prior to this very merge request here, we only worked with structs and no interfaces, which
Hmm.
made mocking somewhat hard or impossible even. I changed that in a somewhat backwards compatible way, unless you did some weird stuff, then it would break. But we took that risk. And we have those interfaces now, and we can mock those. And I created the interfaces just from the currently implemented functions that we have available in Client Go.
All right. Yeah, that.
So, but it's an interesting point you raise with the generating from specs. So recently, we actually generate a open API spec for the GitLab REST API, but it's a V2 of open API.
Yeah.
And
And
that's kind of outdated. And there in Go, there's a tool called Open API Generator or CodeGen
yeah,
or something like this, which is a very nice project, but it only supports V3. So, and the reason we do not support V2 is because the Ruby gem that produces this Open API spec
yeah,
doesn't
the Grape does only support V2.
Yeah, which is a bummer because if this would be supported, I think Client Go would look from one day to the other drastically different. I think that's the point where we are probably gonna have a new package in here or a new project or something like this that makes use
Ye-
of
Yeah, and even
this
the
spec.
V2 documentation is completely invalid if you only go by V2 spec because it has a lot of example stuff in there that isn't valid as of OpenAPI V2.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Because I tried, I'm planning to work on something of a GitLab mobile app at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And so I tried generating a Kotlin client,
Yeah.
and I spent like 8 hours trying to clean up the OpenAPI spec to a point where I can actually generate stuff somewhat meaningfully, and it just worked so horribly in the end that I just decided to write the types and everything myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is a shame. I would love it if we could. I think I've poked a few times, but yeah, I couldn't even. I can't remember if I couldn't get it to work in the browser, if it did work in the browser on .com, but not on self-managed. Or yeah, I had a bit of a nightmare with it because I do wish. So if we go get that REST API. Merge requests, for example, we've got we've got all of this, which every time someone makes a change to the API, they have to remember to update this documentation.
Yeah.
And you can see from some of the response, probably typical I've picked about it. Now I've picked a pretty good example. You can see that this example was probably from 7 years ago. So the chances of this structure still being the same are very, very slim. So it'd be so much nicer if we were using Open API.
I mean, the OpenAPI spec rendering works fairly well. just trying to use it for code gen doesn't really work that well.
Okay.
And it also dumps everything into a single package, at least in Kotlin, and doesn't really nicely resolve nested structs or nested objects and responses. So yeah, I spent hours on hours trying to get that to work and decided it's not worth it because it's more cleanup work than I reasonably want to do. Yeah. Just out of interest, are there any official efforts at some point to create a mobile app, or isn't it?
Definitely seen, like, I don't know that it's something that we're, again, feel free to interrupt me, Timo, but it's not something that I think we're proactively working on, but I've definitely seen other community efforts that have been shared at some point.
Yeah, there's lab code, of course. There in the past there was, I think, Git Plus for GitLab that I used and then forked into Lab Plus. But that Flutter code base was such a mess that I decided, okay, let's rewrite it from scratch and create something in Kotlin. So yeah, there's been a bit of stuff, but none of it is super actively maintained.
See if I can find anything from searching. But, 2 years ago, this is old. Share. So this is one that a team member started working on a few years ago, but it doesn't look like it's got anything recent on it. Let's see.
Oh, yeah, that also looks like React Native, yeah.
No, I can't see anything else from recent conversations. So yeah, so that's something that if we've got sort of 5-10 minutes left at the end, that I wouldn't mind brainstorming on. So our community forks at the moment, it's not the most I don't know what you call it, onerous, labor intensive process to create them, which is why I guess we haven't really followed up on moving this over to Terraform. But at one point we started to explore, and I think we've come back full circle to kind of look at this again, how easily we can just do it via Terraform essentially. So what's probably a good idea is to start with process and see if there's any kind of concerns, which I know there will be, or like see if we think, oh, this is all possible, or if there's any challenges along the way. So the team member process for creating a new community fork. So first, we need to make sure that the subgroup, like the path exists. So, would you? Let's get another scribble here as well. Would you suggest? So here I've created this, that you just do that manually, so to speak. So if we're creating a fork of the GitLab project. That's in GitLab org. So you would come and you would make sure that the GitLab org project was in here. You're doing the fork of, so I've got open, the client Go. So you need to make sure that GitLab org/API is in here, or could you be, or would it make more sense to be clever and somewhere have the path in somewhere else, and actually we can intelligently say, does that path exist, and if it doesn't, kind of create that? Or
Yeah, I mean, potentially you could make it dynamic and, create the group resources dynamically. But to start with, I would not. Like, I would follow being boring and just
absolutely.
manually create those resources. And then I think that, if you do that dynamically, then what if you want to, let's say you have this subgroups like we've seen in the client Go, where you have GitLab org and then API and then client Go. Even if for client Go you would have like a more dynamic resource that creates the GitLab org and API org. But what if you want to link a project to a group in the hierarchy? You still need a reference to that, right? If it's more dynamic, you don't have an exact name to that, and so
Yeah.
I wouldn't
Cool.
attempt to do that, at least in the first iteration. Like,
No, absolutely. Keep it simple. I like it.
yeah, 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 yeah.
So now my brain's gone. In terms of, forgive me because I know this is like Terraform 101, but
All good.
where we're the scenario that we're in now, where we've created a lot of them manually,
Yeah.
what's the best way to sort of bootstrap this file with what already exists?
Yeah, so you would write your config manually, um, and then you would run like tofu or Terraform import of the resources that are in your config. And a subsequent plan would then basically tell you if you've done a good job defining your
Cool.
um,
It's import, is it?
config.
Sorry, that you said that you can use to connect the.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so
Cool.
every resource in the documentation has a little section about the import, like how you can actually import it, because you need an ID to import. And sometimes, with the group, it's kind of obvious you have the group ID, but with, like, let's say I don't know, an approval rule, it's not that obvious. So it gives you the schema of the import ID that you have to use.
Oh yeah, okay. So it's where, yeah, where you have. I'm trying to think of some crazy examples that I've had with Cloudflare or something else in the past, where it might be that you've got the group ID and the project ID, or
Yes,
the
yes,
two.
exactly. Yeah, so it
Yeah.
will be like a chain. Usually there's a colon between the to separate. So you have like, I don't know, group ID, colon, project ID, colon, approval rule or something like this.
And you generally import them one resource at a time.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, if you have like, let's say you have a huge AWS account that you need to import, there is tooling to generate or bootstrap Terraform configs in the import
Yeah.
statements, etc., for like bigger providers and stuff like this. I don't know if it exists for the GitLab Terraform provider. I wouldn't
Okay.
know of any.
Awesome. Okay, so we've got our groups. So then from, let's see how far, I have really cannot remember where we got to with this. So then with for the project forks, you can then reference the groups like this,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah. Well,
Um,
actually, a good example is the Renovate bot that we use, because there we've implemented a similar scenario where the Renovate bot has a fork of all the projects that we maintain.
yeah, of course, yeah,
We
yeah.
use Renovate there, Open Tofu there too to actually do this. So
Awesome.
it's probably worth looking at this.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. Do you remember offhand at all whether it uses push mirroring or pull mirroring?
It does use pull mirroring, yeah.
Uses pull mirroring.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah, push mirroring. If you use push mirroring, then you have the problem that you need to have access um to the upstream repo that you fork from, which is probably not something that, me as a maintainer of, I don't know, GitLab org GitLab, I don't want your fork to have write access.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Cool. Yeah, so this is interesting actually. It's vaguely flashing back before me that these were some of the newer features. And these weren't available in the Terraform provider, possibly weren't even available in the Go package. I wonder if I even possibly added one or more of these to the Go package and or the Terraform provider when I started working on this. So that might be kind of a point at which I stopped and yeah, coming back to it. Okay. So yeah, we do something quite interesting when we create the fork. So the pull mirroring, you have to set up as a user, so to speak. So what we actually do is we have a service account, and that service account we essentially create a personal access token for that service account, and then it uses that personal access token to then set up the pull mirroring.
Yeah.
And then the personal access token is kind of revoked essentially. So it only exists for long enough to set up the pull mirroring. And once the pull mirroring is set up, then it's all good.
But doesn't it, like, how does it then? Oh, it can still pull because it's a public thing, or why does it?
So the reason it can still pull is yes, because it's public, but more specifically, so we used to use, I think, either a project access token or a group access token or something to set up the pull mirroring. The problem with that is when the token expires, the user gets deleted and the mirroring stops working. But with a service account, the user sort of persists indefinitely. So even when the token is revoked or expired, the mirroring will continue to work.
Yeah, I still don't fully understand why you need a token in the first place to set up the pull mirroring.
Because you need to make an API call.
Oh, okay. Oh, for that API. Okay,
yes.
okay. But you wouldn't have this problem here because you would authenticate that the Terraform provider with a token.
Yeah.
That's able to read, you know, these public repos because and to actually create the fork, right? You need to be able to create the fork, and with that inherently you can set up the pull mirror for the same project. Actually, the fork here that you do, is that you do a forked from project ID, so that actually creates a fork this resource, and then with the import URL, which already sets you up the pull mirroring. So you don't need anything additional than what you have already here.
Yeah, good point. Good point. So the pull mirroring is going to be configured as the user that Terraform is using to authenticate.
Yeah, not even that. It doesn't even use a user, I think, at this point.
Yeah, no, you're right. It uses a user to set up pull mirroring, but it doesn't use that user to actually. Well,
I mean, for the Renovate forks, we actually use the Renovate bot user to set up the mirroring. So there is two attributes here in the GitLab project resource called import username and import password that you can use.
Okay.
For setting up the pull mirror using, you know, credentials.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, it's really weird. It's really weird the way it's set up because it is owned by user pull mirroring, which is really weird because, you know, like if you look at certain people's contribution activity and graph on their user profile, if they've got pull mirroring enabled, actually shows that they're the ones that are pushing all these commits to their mirror.
Oh, really? Okay, I didn't know.
Yeah. So it's weird. Like as much as that sort of makes sense, what would happen is if let's say we used a project access token or a group access token to authenticate Terraform with GitLab. When that token expires or gets rotated, the mirrors will all fail and stop mirroring. So what we would need to do is make sure we use a service account to authenticate Terraform.
Yeah, but this wouldn't happen if you use Terraform because you don't even need to use the service account because you can use you can set up your project access token. Um, and
Yeah,
then
but when that project access token expires,
it
the
doesn't matter
user will
because
get deleted.
well, you would run your Terraform apply in a scheduled pipeline, and you would have we have a rotation configuration in the personal project access token, even service account tokens. You can tell it, how like the amount of days I think that it should have keep the token valid and then revoke it and create a new one. How many days before the expiration? So you could tell it, a week before expiration, I'm going to rotate. And then if you have in your Terraform code, we just use this token generated from this other resource inside of your fork resource, and you would use it as a password there. And then, it just keeps updating the pull mirror for you.
So you're saying actually authenticate. Yeah, I still think that's going to break. So if if okay, and it's so long since I've done it, but if Terraform is using a project or group access token to authenticate with GitLab,
Yes.
then the pull mirroring will be set up as that user. It won't use any credentials to connect when it does the mirroring, but the pull mirroring is owned and belongs to that user.
But you can still, it doesn't matter. I mean, if you go to your fork GitLab TF file, maybe you can quickly scratch it in there because you can, in here, yeah, press enter and then you can type like import username and import password.
I'll have to test it and send you the results,
Yeah.
but I'm 99% confident that that's irrelevant. That if the user who set up the pull mirroring
But
no longer exists,
yeah, but the thing is,
it stops
yeah.
working.
But the thing is, we are changing with every apply the entire pull mirroring setup.
Oh,
So
okay.
each time you rotate the token, you not only get a new, like you may get a new token, but depending on how you do it, you may also get a new user for that token, right? And then it would just detect a change in those attributes, and it
Right.
update the pull mirror for you in the next
Got it.
apply,
Got
basically.
it.
So
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, that makes sense. So yeah, essentially, it's actually going to almost delete the pull mirroring and recreate the pull mirroring every time.
that's what it does. Yeah, exactly. That's what it does. Yeah.
But it'd only
I
do
hate to
that if.
interrupt,
Go on.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
I have one more question before I
Yeah. Far
go.
away.
Is there any reason why the docs for the CLI aren't in the official GitLab docs and are just markdown files in the repo, or?
My answer would be that we've not got as far as migrating them into the docs project. Is that correct? Or
I don't have historical context, but if I have to make a reason up, then the CLI is versioned differently and released in a different cadence than GitLab. So if
Fair.
whenever we publish a self-managed release for GitLab, it would include some documentation of some version of the CLI, which may not be the one that you're actually using. Like you can use a new CLI version with an old GitLab release and vice versa. So I don't know how much it would make sense to include the docs there directly. Does it make sense?
That makes sense. It would just be kind of nice to have like a central place to look for
Yeah, I
docs for
understand.
anything related to GitLab. Maybe not like in the like GitLab docs directly, but maybe have a docs page on docs.gitlab.com that does the CLI stuff, maybe one that does the Terraform provider stuff, however that goes. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I understand the reason. Um, I'm sure it links to the docs, but yeah.
All right.
awesome, awesome. Um, Thanks so much for joining, Timo, and for educating me in a few a few bits and pieces. Hopefully we'll actually get back around to trying to set this Terraform up, and hopefully there's no gaps now. And if there are, then between us and the community, we'll make sure that they get patched up.
Sure.
I'll keep you posted. Awesome. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye bye.
Catch you later. Bye bye.